Americans are looking for solutions to the problems they see, particularly in the Congress and the swamp in Washington. This election cycle, there's one solution being promoted, which at first glance seems to be a good remedy for getting rid of bad politicians, and that is to term limit the representatives we send to Congress. But is that a real solution? Most people do not know that the Articles of Confederation were ratified in 1781. Within a few short years, there were already issues, which is why they called a meeting to amend the Articles of Confederation. This meeting turned into a constitutional convention, and one of the things they eliminated was term limits. This was accomplished only 7 years later with a new constitution. They had discovered that while the idea seemed to have great merit, in practice it did not only not work, it led to some of those who were term limited to sell out their votes to the highest bidder. After all, they could not be elected again, so why not get the best deal they could before leaving office? It also meant that the good was thrown out with the bad. 15 states term limit their legislatures today, anywhere from 6 to 12 years, most of them 8 years. The idea of term limits is to get rid of the Congress of men and women who are liberals and socialists. Has this happened with the presidency? The president is limited to 2 terms. Since this limitation, we have had several presidents that no matter what they called themselves, they were socialist and or globalists. So, term limits haven't worked so well in this regard. In the state of California, it has term limits. Has it worked to get rid of the socialist and communist majority in that legislature? What about Colorado, Nevada, Michigan, and others? They have term limits. Has it changed these legislatures into bastions of Americanism? No. So, term limits doesn't seem to be quite the answer. Let us look at the other side of the ledger. Did term limits help conservatives? No. The good legislators are turned out along with the bad. On the national scale, term limits for the Congress would have eliminated good men, such as Ron Paul, before he was ready to step down. What good did this one man do? Very little in the general scheme of things, but we'd be hard-pressed to argue that he didn't do any good, mainly because there wasn't enough other Ron Pauls to help him. This is a hint as to the real problem. If the experienced legislators are turned out, only the inexperienced ones are elected. In this case, it gives entirely too much weight to the staffs that walk the halls of the legislatures and Congress. These bloated professionals then take complete charge since they know what they're doing. If a socialist is term limited out, who's he replaced with? The voters haven't changed, so what will happen is that they will vote in a mirror image of the person they elected for so many years in the first place. You've replaced an old socialist with a younger socialist. The same political machine in the district will get their person elected, no matter who that person is. So, what is the answer? From time to time, there have been scandals and issues that override the general voting pattern, and this can get rid of a bad person in Congress. But this is rare. It becomes more rare as time goes by and the general morality level of the population deteriorates. What was a sin yesterday and intolerable may only be a character trait to be tolerated today. And it depends on who's committing the sin. One side seems to forgive their politicians more often than the other side. So again, what is the answer to rid us of corrupt politicians and Marxists? The answer is what it was yesterday, today, and tomorrow: the knowledge of the American people. As Isaiah said, "My people go into bondage due to ignorance." In order to have better government, the people have to rise to a level of understanding of our American system, the principles on which it stands, and an understanding of the primary documents of Americanism, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Only in this manner can the Republic be preserved, and the Congress to once again become a house of liberty. It cannot be done all at once, but it can be done a district at a time. The entire program of the John Birch Society is based on the premise of educating the public. Yes, we organize chapters in local communities all across the country to first educate ourselves and then others. our families, friends, fellow employees, the opinion molders in our communities. We also engage in action. Just as a school prepares us for life, education on Americanist principles prepares us for action. With enough members in an area, things begin to change. Not simply because we're organized, but because we're organized to spread understanding. As this understanding begins to spread, the voting pattern of the area changes, electing those who adhere to the Constitution. It doesn't take many to do this, but it takes enough willing hands pulling at the oars, steering the boat constantly toward our goal of less government, more responsibility, and with God's help, a better world. This is how you change Congress. Simply getting rid of people out of Congress will not change the Congress. You will have to change the bodies in the seats, but will they be better than those who were there before them? The answer is no. The elected have to be educated and voted in by an informed electorate. No other group works the way the John Birch Society does by organizing its members locally on a national concerted plan. The political parties do not do so. They simply take polls to find out what they have to say to the voters in order to get them to vote for them. They never educate the voter. The only educating they do is to enlist people to work in their campaigns to gather votes. If you want change, you have to engage in the process of change, and that is to get involved in a national education campaign in your local community to change how your neighbors vote. The best way to do that is to join the John Birch Society and get to work. The work is done between elections, not the few weeks before we go to the polls. A major figure running for president may pull along voters for his political party, but this stops once that figure leaves the scene and the general voting pattern reverts to what it was. So we're asking for your action to get serious and help educate your fellow citizens by joining the John Birch Society and then enlist others into the cause. When we have enough people in your area, then your area will start to vote in better people who you will not want to term limit out of office.